Some people don't break your heart with betrayal, they break your spirit with repeated disrespect. And the dangerous part is this: the more you forgive what destroys your dignity, the more you teach others how to treat you. Today, you will discover the 7 disrespectful acts you should never forgive. Not because you are cruel, but because your peace, your self-worth, and your future depend on. There is a kind of pain that does not leave bruises on the body, but leaves permanent scars on the spirit. It happens quietly, often in rooms full of laughter, hidden behind jokes, sarcasm, and harmless comments. It happens when someone who claims to care about you repeatedly humiliates you in front of others. At first, you try to ignore it. You tell yourself you are being too sensitive. You force a smile because everyone else is laughing. But deep inside, something begins to crack. Because humiliation is not simply embarrassment. Humiliation is the deliberate reduction of another human being's dignity. The most dangerous part is that public disrespect rarely begins with cruelty so obvious that you immediately walk away. It starts subtly: a mocking comment about your intelligence, a sarcastic remark about your appearance, a story told at your expense while everyone watches your reaction. The person humiliating you may even place an arm around your shoulder afterward and say, "Relax, I'm only joking." But genuine love does not enjoy seeing discomfort in your eyes. Genuine affection does not repeatedly expose your insecurities for entertainment. People who respect you protect your dignity when others are present. They do not use your weaknesses as material to gain attention, approval, or laughter. Over time, repeated humiliation changes the way you see yourself. You become cautious about speaking because you fear being mocked again. You hesitate before sharing ideas because someone has trained you to expect embarrassment instead of support. You begin shrinking your personality to avoid becoming a target. And perhaps the saddest transformation of all is this: you start participating in your own humiliation. You laugh at insults directed toward you simply to survive the moment. You betray your own feelings because confronting the disrespect feels more uncomfortable than enduring it. Many people stay trapped in these dynamics because they confuse tolerance with maturity. They believe remaining silent makes them emotionally strong. But silence in the face of repeated humiliation is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is fear. Fear of losing relationships, fear of conflict, fear of being abandoned if you finally defend yourself. So instead of demanding respect, they adapt to disrespect. They become performers in a cruel emotional theater where their pain entertains others. And the human mind remembers humiliation differently from other experiences. A person may forget compliments after a few days, but humiliation echoes for years. One degrading moment in front of family, friends, coworkers, or strangers can replay in someone's mind endlessly. That is because public shame attacks identity itself. It creates a deep internal question: am I truly worthy of respect? The tragedy is that many victims begin believing the insults they repeatedly hear. What started as another person's cruelty slowly becomes self-perception. There are people who humiliate others because it gives them a temporary feeling of power. They feel insecure internally, so they reduce others publicly to elevate themselves emotionally. Some do it to dominate relationships. Some do it to gain approval from groups. Others do it because they learned cruelty from environments where tenderness was considered weakness. But regardless of the reason, repeated humiliation reveals character. A person who consistently embarrasses you in front of others is showing you how little they value your emotional safety. Never underestimate the emotional violence of mockery disguised as affection. Some of the most broken individuals are not those who were hated openly, but those who were ridiculed repeatedly by people they loved deeply. A child mocked constantly by parents may grow into an adult terrified of expressing opinions. A partner repeatedly humiliated in a relationship may lose confidence so gradually that they no longer recognize themselves. A friend, publicly insulted for years, may develop silent resentment mixed with emotional exhaustion. What makes this disrespect especially destructive is that it often happens in social environments where the victim feels pressured to remain calm. The room expects laughter, not confrontation. The culture rewards wit more than sensitivity. And so the wounded person becomes isolated inside their own pain while everyone else moves on casually, unaware that another piece of someone's confidence has just been destroyed. Trust is one of the rarest treasures a human being can give. It is invisible, fragile, and deeply sacred because it requires vulnerability. The moment you trust someone, you place parts of your emotional life into their hands. You reveal fears you hide from the world, memories that still hurt you, dreams that feel delicate, insecurities you are ashamed to admit, and truths that make you feel exposed. Trust is not built in a single conversation. It is built slowly through consistency, honesty, and emotional safety. That is why betrayal cuts so deeply. It destroys not only the relationship, but also the sense of security that existed inside it. There are wounds caused by strangers, and then there are wounds caused by people who knew exactly where your heart was most fragile. Betrayal becomes devastating because it comes from someone who had access to your inner world. They knew your fears, they knew your history, they understood what could break you emotionally, and despite that knowledge, they still chose actions that shattered your confidence in them. Some betrayals happen through lies, others through infidelity, manipulation, gossip, broken promises, or exposing secrets that were shared in vulnerability. Regardless of the form, betrayal always carries the same message. Your trust was less important to me than my desires, my ego, or my convenience. One of the most painful realities about betrayal is that the victim often blames themselves first. They replay conversations repeatedly in their mind, searching for warning signs they ignored. They wonder if they trusted too quickly, loved too deeply, or believed too much. Betrayal creates confusion because the image you had of someone suddenly collides with the truth of their actions. The person you believed would protect your heart becomes the person who damaged it most. And the mind struggles to reconcile those two realities at the same time. People often speak about forgiveness as though it automatically heals betrayal, but some betrayals permanently change how you see a person. Forgiveness may release hatred from your heart, but it does not magically restore trust. Trust is not rebuilt through apologies alone. It is rebuilt through transformed behavior, accountability, honesty, and time. Yet many people apologize only because they fear consequences, loneliness, or losing access to the person they hurt. Their regret is centered on their own discomfort rather than the pain they caused. And this is why so many individuals find themselves trapped in cycles of repeated betrayal. They mistake emotional words for genuine transformation. There is also a particular cruelty in betrayal that happens privately while affection continues publicly. Some people smile in your face while secretly undermining you behind your back. They pretend loyalty while spreading your secrets. They act supportive while competing with you silently. They comfort you while preparing deception. This type of betrayal damages more than emotions. It damages perception itself. After experiencing it repeatedly, many people begin questioning everyone around them. Their ability to trust becomes weakened because betrayal teaches the nervous system to anticipate danger even in safe situations. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is that betrayal often changes innocent people into guarded people. Someone who once loved openly becomes emotionally distant. Someone who once believed in loyalty begins expecting disappointment. The heart becomes defensive because it remembers what happened when it was fully open. This is why betrayal can echo far beyond the original relationship. It affects future friendships, future love, future vulnerability, and future emotional risks. A single deep betrayal can create walls that last for years. There are individuals who betray others because they lack emotional discipline. They chase temporary pleasure without considering permanent consequences. Others betray because they crave validation, attention, or power. Some betray because honesty requires courage they do not possess. But regardless of the explanation, betrayal reveals something critical about character. A person willing to sacrifice your emotional safety for personal benefit has already shown you where you stand in their priorities. Many people remain loyal long after betrayal because they are attached not to who the person truly is, but to who they hoped they would become. They cling to memories, promises, and emotional history while ignoring repeated evidence. They continue giving chances because accepting the truth feels unbearable. But denial cannot protect the heart forever. Eventually, reality becomes louder than excuses. A relationship without trust slowly becomes emotional torture. You begin analyzing words, questioning intentions, checking for hidden meanings, and living in constant anxiety about what else might be concealed from you. Peace disappears because trust was the foundation holding everything together. And once that foundation collapses, even love begins to feel unstable. One of the clearest signs that someone does not truly respect you is their inability to respect your boundaries. Boundaries are not walls designed to punish people. They are emotional lines that protect your peace, your dignity, your mental stability, and your sense of self. They define what you will tolerate and what you will no longer allow into your life. A healthy person may not always understand your boundaries immediately, but they will still honor them because they value your emotional safety. A disrespectful person, however, sees boundaries as obstacles standing between them and control. Many people grow up believing boundaries are selfish. They are taught to constantly sacrifice themselves to keep others comfortable. They learn to say yes when they want to say no. They learn to remain available even when exhausted. They learn to tolerate disrespect because they fear disappointing people. Over time, they become so disconnected from their own emotional needs that they feel guilty the moment they attempt to protect themselves. And this is exactly why manipulative individuals are often attracted to people with weak boundaries. They know such people can be pressured, controlled, and emotionally exhausted without resistance. Boundary violations rarely begin dramatically. They often start with small dismissals that seem insignificant at first. Someone ignores your request for privacy. Someone pressures you after you already expressed discomfort. Someone repeatedly interrupts your time, your rest, your emotional space, or your decisions while acting as though your needs are unimportant. The danger lies in repetition. When someone consistently ignores your clearly expressed limits, they are sending a message without speaking directly. What you feel matters less than what I want. The emotional damage caused by constant boundary violations is deeper than many realize. When your limits are ignored repeatedly, you slowly stop trusting yourself. You begin questioning whether your needs are even valid. You become emotionally trained to prioritize the comfort of others above your own well-being. Eventually, exhaustion becomes your normal state because your life turns into an endless performance of accommodation. You are constantly adjusting yourself so others never feel inconvenience, while your own emotional health quietly collapses in the background. Some people react negatively the moment you establish boundaries because boundaries expose unhealthy dynamics. A person who benefited from your silence will feel threatened when you finally speak. A person who enjoyed controlling you will call you difficult once you stop tolerating disrespect. Suddenly, your self-respect becomes labeled as arrogance. Your emotional limits become labeled as selfishness. Your desire for peace becomes labeled as attitude. But healthy love never punishes you for protecting your mental and emotional stability. There are people who only appreciate your kindness as long as it requires your self-destruction. The moment you begin saying no, They reveal how conditional their affection truly was. They become angry not because you changed unfairly, but because they lost unlimited access to your energy, your time, and your emotional availability. This is why boundaries often expose the truth about relationships faster than almost anything else. A person who truly respects you listens when you communicate discomfort. They care about your emotional reality even when it inconveniences them. But a manipulative person will pressure you repeatedly until you surrender. They use guilt, anger, silence, disappointment, or emotional withdrawal as tools to force compliance. They make you feel responsible for their reactions. And over time, many people begin abandoning their own limits simply to avoid emotional conflict. The tragedy is that individuals who constantly violate boundaries often appear charming to outsiders. They may seem generous, social, charismatic, or caring in public while privately dismissing your emotional needs repeatedly. This creates confusion because the victim starts doubting their own perception. They wonder whether they are exaggerating or becoming too sensitive. But emotional exhaustion does not appear without reason. Constant anxiety around someone is not random. Feeling drained after every interaction is not weakness. The body recognizes disrespect long before the mind fully accepts it. When you live without boundaries, resentment slowly poisons your relationships. You give more than you can emotionally sustain. You remain available when you need rest. You tolerate behavior that deeply hurts you because confrontation feels uncomfortable. But buried emotions do not disappear. They accumulate silently until frustration, bitterness, and emotional numbness begin taking over your inner life. Some of the most emotionally broken people are not those who loved too little, but those who abandoned themselves repeatedly in the name of love. They spent years protecting everyone else's feelings while nobody protected theirs. They became emotionally exhausted because they confused self-sacrifice with goodness. And eventually, they lost connection with their own identity because their entire existence revolved around avoiding disapproval and maintaining peace for others at the expense of themselves. One of the most painful forms of disrespect is not physical aggression or open hatred, but the quiet destruction of your spirit through constant criticism of your dreams, your ambitions, and your personal growth. There are people who become uncomfortable the moment they see you evolving. They tolerated you when you doubted yourself, when you remained small, when you lacked confidence. But the moment you begin changing, improving, healing, or aiming higher, their behavior shifts. Suddenly, your goals become unrealistic in their eyes, your vision becomes foolish, your growth becomes threatening, and instead of supporting your transformation, they begin mocking it. Dreams are deeply personal because they come from the most hopeful part of the human soul. They represent possibility, meaning, purpose, and the desire to become more than your current circumstances. That is why criticism directed at your dreams cuts so deeply. It attacks not only what you want to achieve, but also your belief in yourself. A person can recover from failure more easily than from years of emotional discouragement. Failure teaches lessons, but constant mockery teaches self-doubt. Many people abandon extraordinary potential not because they lack talent, but because someone repeatedly convinced them they were incapable. Sometimes the discouragement comes from strangers, but often it comes from people closest to you. Family members, friends, partners, or individuals whose opinions matter deeply to your heart. And because emotional closeness creates influence, their words begin shaping your internal voice. Eventually, their criticism no longer needs to be spoken aloud because you start repeating it to yourself automatically. There are individuals who disguise discouragement as realism. They say things like, "I'm only trying to protect you from disappointment," or "Be realistic about your limitations." But true care does not crush hope. Genuine love may offer wisdom, caution, or honest perspective, but it never humiliates your desire to grow. A loving person wants to see your spirit expand, not shrink. They may challenge you constructively, but they do not repeatedly make you feel ridiculous for believing in a better future. What makes this kind of disrespect especially dangerous is that it often happens slowly over time. A sarcastic comment here, a dismissive laugh there, a subtle comparison designed to make you feel inadequate. The attacks are small enough to deny, yet consistent enough to weaken your confidence gradually. Over time, you stop speaking openly about your goals because you anticipate criticism instead of encouragement. You begin hiding your ambitions to protect yourself emotionally. And eventually, many people settle for lives far smaller than the ones they once imagined because constant negativity exhausted their courage. Some people feel threatened by growth because your transformation forces them to confront their own stagnation. Your discipline reminds them of their excuses. Your healing reminds them of wounds they refuse to face. Your ambition reminds them of risks they were too afraid to take. Instead of confronting their own dissatisfaction honestly, they attempt to pull you back toward familiarity. They prefer the version of you that remained uncertain, dependent, insecure, or emotionally available to their control. There is also a hidden loneliness that comes with growth. The moment you begin changing internally, not everyone will celebrate you. Some people only love the version of you that required less from them emotionally. They felt comfortable when you lacked boundaries, confidence, direction, or self-worth because your weakness preserved their importance in your life. But growth changes relationships. It changes conversations, priorities, standards, and emotional dynamics. And not everyone has the maturity to evolve alongside you. A person who constantly mocks your progress is not merely expressing opinions. They are slowly conditioning you to fear your own potential. They plant hesitation inside your mind. They make you second-guess opportunities, talents, and instincts that could transform your future. The tragedy is that many people never realize how deeply they have been emotionally controlled until years later when they look back at the dreams they abandoned simply because someone convinced them they were impossible. The human spirit requires encouragement to flourish. Even the strongest individuals become exhausted when surrounded by constant negativity. Words carry emotional weight. Repeated criticism creates internal resistance that slowly drains motivation. You begin every new idea already expecting failure because someone trained you to associate ambition with embarrassment. And once fear of ridicule enters the mind, people stop taking risks. They stop creating, they stop believing, they choose emotional safety over possibility because criticism made courage feel dangerous. One of the clearest and most painful revelations about human relationships is discovering who remains present when life stops being easy. It is simple to stand beside someone when everything is going well, when conversations are light, when laughter is easy, and when there is nothing heavy to carry. Many people can appear loyal during comfort because comfort does not demand sacrifice. But true character is revealed in moments of difficulty, when emotional presence is required, when support becomes inconvenient, and when showing up would require effort, patience, or emotional maturity. There are individuals who enjoy being part of your life during moments of success. They celebrate your achievements, they enjoy your energy, they benefit from your positivity, and they are present when your presence brings them comfort or advantage. But the moment your life becomes heavy, when you are going through emotional collapse, personal loss, confusion, or vulnerability, they slowly disappear. Not always in dramatic ways, but through subtle absence. Messages become delayed, calls go unanswered, availability becomes inconsistent, excuses become more frequent. Gradually, you realize that their presence was conditional all along. This type of emotional absence is particularly painful because it creates a sense of imbalance in relationships. You begin to remember how often you were there for them during their difficult moments. You recall the times you listened, supported, comforted, and showed patience when they needed you. You gave time when it was inconvenient. You offered emotional energy when you were tired. You made space for their struggles even when your own life was demanding. And now, when roles reverse, the absence feels like a quiet betrayal of reciprocity. Human beings are not required to solve each other's problems, but there is a fundamental expectation of emotional presence in meaningful relationships. Being present does not always mean fixing someone's situation. Sometimes it simply means staying connected, listening, acknowledging pain, and not disappearing when things become uncomfortable. But those who lack emotional responsibility often withdraw precisely when stability is most needed. They choose distance over discomfort. They choose silence over involvement. They choose convenience over loyalty. The impact of such abandonment during difficult times is deeper than many realize. When someone disappears in your moments of need, it does not only create loneliness, it creates emotional insecurity. It makes you question whether your relationships are real or merely transactional. You begin wondering whether people value you for who you are or only for what you provide when you are emotionally strong, useful, or entertaining. And this uncertainty slowly erodes trust in relationships as a whole. There are also individuals who remain physically present but emotionally absent. They may still respond occasionally, still appear in social settings, still maintain surface level communication, but their emotional investment disappears when you are struggling. They avoid difficult conversations. They change topics when emotions deepen. They distance themselves from your pain because it feels heavy or uncomfortable. This creates an even more confusing experience because their presence feels real, yet their support feels missing. Some people disappear not out of malice, but out of emotional immaturity. They do not know how to handle discomfort, vulnerability, or emotional responsibility. They prefer environments that are easy, positive, and light because they lack the tools to engage with deeper emotional experiences. However, regardless of intention, the impact remains the same. A person who is consistently absent during your hardest moments is not participating in the full reality of your life. There is a profound loneliness that comes from realizing that not everyone who smiles with you is willing to stand with you when life becomes difficult. It forces a reevaluation of relationships, priorities, and emotional expectations. You begin to understand that some connections are built on convenience rather than commitment, and that emotional loyalty is not as common as emotional enjoyment. Over time, repeated experiences of abandonment during hardship can reshape how a person connects with others. They become more cautious about opening up. They hesitate before trusting. They reduce emotional dependency because they have learned that not everyone is reliable when needed most. This self-protection can appear as emotional distance, but it is often a response to repeated experiences of inconsistency and absence. There are those who will always be present when it is easy, when it is joyful, when it is socially rewarding, but who quietly retreat when emotional responsibility is required. Their absence during your hardest moments becomes a silent indicator of the depth or lack of depth in the connection they share with you. There is a form of disrespect that does not shout, does not insult openly, and does not always reveal itself in obvious conflict. Yet it is one of the most damaging experiences a person can endure in relationships. It is emotional manipulation, the subtle and calculated distortion of your feelings, your perceptions, and your inner sense of reality. Unlike direct arguments or honest disagreements, emotional manipulation operates in silence, confusion, and psychological pressure. It is designed not to confront you, but to control how you think, how you feel, and how you respond. At the beginning, manipulation rarely looks threatening. In fact, it can appear as care, affection, or deep emotional involvement. A manipulative person may seem attentive, deeply interested in your emotions, and highly connected to your vulnerabilities. They learn your emotional patterns, your fears, your insecurities, and the things that make you feel guilty or responsible. Over time, this knowledge becomes a tool, not a tool for understanding you better, but a tool for influencing your behavior in ways that benefit them while slowly weakening your emotional independence. One of the most common techniques in emotional manipulation is guilt. A person may twist situations in such a way that you begin feeling responsible for their emotional state, even when you have done nothing wrong. You may express a boundary, a need, or a simple discomfort, and instead of respecting it, they respond with disappointment, withdrawal, or emotional pressure. Suddenly, you are not addressing your own needs anymore. You are managing their reaction. This reversal is subtle, but it slowly trains you to prioritize their feelings over your own well-being. Another common pattern is inconsistency. A manipulative person may alternate between warmth and distance, affection and silence, approval and criticism. This unpredictability creates emotional instability because the mind naturally tries to restore balance by adjusting behavior to regain approval. You begin analyzing every word you say, every action you take, trying to avoid triggering withdrawal or negativity. This constant emotional monitoring drains mental energy and gradually shifts control away from you and toward the other person. There is also the technique of invalidation, where your emotions are minimized or dismissed. When you express hurt, you are told you are overreacting. When you express concern, you are told you are imagining things. When you express discomfort, you are told you are too sensitive. Over time, repeated invalidation creates self-doubt. You stop trusting your emotional instincts. You begin questioning whether your reactions are valid or exaggerated. This erosion of self-trust is one of the deepest consequences of manipulation, because once a person stops trusting their own perception, they become easier to influence. Some manipulative individuals also use silence as a form of control. Instead of addressing conflict directly, they withdraw emotionally, creating distance that forces the other person into anxiety and uncertainty. This silence is not peaceful, it is strategic. It creates discomfort that pressures the other person to apologize, compromise, or surrender their position just to restore emotional connection. In this dynamic, communication is no longer mutual, it becomes conditional. Emotional manipulation is particularly damaging because it often occurs in relationships that are emotionally significant. It can happen in friendships, romantic relationships, or even family dynamics. The emotional attachment makes it harder to recognize the pattern clearly. People tend to excuse manipulation by focusing on good moments, remembering affection, and hoping for change. This hope creates cycles where manipulation is repeated, followed by brief periods of kindness that reinforce attachment. Over time, exposure to emotional manipulation can reshape a person's entire internal world. They become overly cautious, afraid of conflict, hesitant to express needs, and constantly aware of how others might react. They begin to suppress emotions to maintain peace. They start avoiding honesty to prevent emotional consequences. And gradually, they lose a sense of emotional freedom, replacing it with emotional survival strategies. What makes this form of disrespect so destructive is that it does not simply harm relationships, it alters perception. It makes a person doubt their instincts, question their emotions, and depend on external validation to determine what is real. It replaces clarity with confusion and confidence with hesitation. And once a person becomes disconnected from their own emotional truth, they become vulnerable not only in one relationship, but in all future connections where similar patterns appear again